Welcome everyone to today's session. We are talking about integrate with M365 using immersion platform technologies. My name is Beth and I'm here with Sam. Hi.
How's it going, everyone?
And together today we're going to talk about two things. I will be talking about Microsoft Graph and the tools that you can use to get it integrated into your app. And Sam is going to talk to you about the Fluid framework. Super awesome content. So again, my name is Beth. I'm a software engineer with Microsoft, specifically working in PAX, which stands for Partners, Analytics, and Essential Experiences. We kind of work in the first-party and third-party developer ecosystem, trying to help partners and our developer community to get better access and better toolings around some of the topics, and one of them is Microsoft Graph. So I want you to walk away today from the session understanding three things regarding the graph. First thing is defining and describing the graph. And then I want you to be able to build your first app powered by Graph or adding some of the Graph powered controls into your apps. And the third thing is where to find more apps that is built on top of Microsoft Graph. So part one, what is Microsoft Graph? Today, we offer Microsoft 365 as a single suite of connected applications and services that operate within the context of your identity, whether at home, at work, or at your desk, or on the move. And it is built on a foundation of security and compliance. In other words, it's a set of interconnected secure tools that help you do more. And the keyword is you and do more, wherever and whenever you need to do it. And the data and insights on which these services operate on, that is Microsoft Graph. So the key definition is Microsoft Graph is the M365 data that describes the patterns of productivity, identity, and security in an organization. And so far, we have over 2,000 APIs in the graph. So because of the graph resides in the cloud, it is not bound to a traditional entity like a device or an operating system. Instead, the graph allows us to pivot around a different kind of entity that is a user. And we can create what we call a people-centric experience, which are apps or solutions that are designed around you and me. Your calendars, your conversations, your communications, tasks, devices, files, and so much more. So digging a little bit deeper into this data that we're talking about, it is your data. It does not cross boundaries or cross organizazations. It requires consent to access it. In this screen, you can see when I'm accessing my ASP.NET app, the app actually asks the user's consent for different things on the screen. And when you click accept, that's when you allow the application to access your data. And the concept of user-centric is not just a marketing concept. It is actually core to the way that we query the Microsoft Graph API itself. If you look at the screen, here are three examples. You can find all the events in my Outlook calendar or create folder in my OneDrive service or get me a list of conference rooms in my building. And the base endpoints of all of these are around me. And then on top of that, we're getting different endpoints to get different data. And you can also see that we created more sophisticated queries based off of what we just showed you. And they are still very much centered around people or groups. For example, you can find files that a user edited last week, which added more parameters about last week, or Words, or OneDrive, and or you can schedule time for a meeting with a group on their Outlook calendar. You can update a planner task for a user based on their group membership. You can also start a new conversation thread for a group in Microsoft Teams. In terms of data available in Microsoft Graph, there are several very popular data sets that we see a large number of applications that integrate with them. These are the data sets that I was talking about: mail, conversation, tasks, users, files, and events. And remember, I mentioned that there are over 2,000 APIs in the graph. Well, here are some of those data sets listed. And each of them comes from a particular product or service in Microsoft 365. And Microsoft Graph provides a core API functionality, includes webhooks, Delta queries, as well as more sophisticated sets of capabilities like connectors, which enables search, and Microsoft Graph Data Connect, which can power analytic tools. With that in mind, let me go back to the definition and add one more sentence. In addition to data that we described here, Microsoft Graph can be accessed through a set of tools that enables you to build your own apps. So in part 2, we're going to show you how to use some of these popular tools to build your first Microsoft Graph powered app. And regarding the tools, we're actually going to focus on developer-centric tools, and there's a lot more. You can read about them in our documentation or go to graph.microsoft.com to find more possibilities to connect to the graph and build your app. First thing I wanted to show you are some of the SDKs available wrapped around the API. They are written in different languages so that you have the flexibility to choose based on your tech stack. Tier 1 are all the Microsoft supported SDKs, which comes from our SDK teams. The Tier 2 SDKs are more community supported. And if you're interested in contributing to all of these or any of these, we are always welcoming you to do that. So the first demo that I'm going to show you guys is how to quickly get started with from downloading a sample, and it takes like 3 to 5 minutes for developers to get started with the Microsoft Graph and using a language that you're familiar with as well. So if you wanted to do anything graph related, remember to go to graph.microsoft.com. This is where most of the resources that we have, here within this one site. You can see there's a lot of different solutions from partners. You can go to Graph Explorer, and what we're going to do right now is go to the Get Started tab, click on Node.js. You can also click on other platforms or languages to get started quickly as well. So I'm just going to get started with Node.js right here. As you can see on this page, there are 3 options that you can kind of explore. The first one is what I just said, quickly download a Connect sample in 3 minutes, start a graph-powered app. You can also follow a tutorial and learn how to build a graph application in about 30 minutes. You can also just directly include the SDK in your existing project if you are just now exploring how to use Microsoft Graph in your own application. So I'm going to click Build an App. You can see that the language is already selected. I'm going to scroll down. Let me make this slightly bigger as well. You could see, here's the prerequisites that you need to have Node. Some quick started at the beginning, how to get your app ID and build a sample in a couple of steps. So we're just going to go to step 2 and click Get an App ID and Secret from here. It has asked me to sign in to this portal. Let me just copy this. And then select this account. Right now, behind the scenes, this portal is trying to create a app ID and secret behind the scenes for me in the Azure portal. So here we have a secret already created right here. Let me just copy it and go back to get quick started. Scroll down, paste it right here, and click download the SDK. While that's doing its own charm, a couple of steps that you can take after you downloaded the SDK-based code sample. Basically, all we need to do is just unzip it, go into the right directory, do an install, and then start the server in your local host. So let's do that real quick and see what it looked like. So I'm going to see where this zip is, unzip this folder. Right click. And then I'm going to unzip if I can find the right one. Extract all. That's okay. And I'm going to copy this folder into my development. Just copy it. Go to PC, data, development, and then go to ISV event, paste it right here. And here in my console, if I check out what's all in this folder, you can see here's the MS Graph project that we just downloaded. I'm also going to go into the graph folder. And if you remember the steps, we're just going to do npm install real quick right here. This is, if you're familiar with Node, behind the scenes, it's just going to install all the necessary dependencies that this project needed. Like it's on. Downloading code and see how it works. So you can see that's the project that I just opened, some default files. If I do npm install right here. Okay, now it's running. This is installing all the dependencies as part of the package.json file. Just a couple of pretty simple ones. I don't know why this is taking forever. It should be done by now. Okay, seems like it was done. Okay, cool. And then we're gonna do it npm start. Allow access. This will start a local server at 3000 for us to look at what the application looks like. So if I go to this localhost, then you can see it's requesting behind the scenes. And I can click here to sign in with Megan's account. I'm just going to do that. And sign in as Megan. And if you remember in the presentation earlier, I was talking about the data is all belong to you. The application actually has to request on behalf of themselves to access the graph. Here are three things that the application is requesting, and you can say I accept to share my data for these permissions. Now Megan is signed in. So super simple. In a couple minutes, we've downloaded a simple app that's connected to the graph, and now you can do things like show the calendar. If I click on the calendar tab, and you can see like all these Megan's calendar items as well. So the next demo I'm going to show you is how to use Graph Explorer to explore the graph APIs that might be useful for your application. Now that we've introduced you how to download a quick demo, quick sample, and already connected to the graph. So again, anything that relates to the graph, go to graph.microsoft.com. Here in the tab, you can click on Graph Explorer. And you can see on the left side is kind of a panel that you can sign into your own tenant or use the existing tenant. And very quickly, this site offers a lot of ready-to-go queries. Under the getting started, these are some of the most popular ones, such as get my profile, the default sandbox solutions profile. What you could also do is, like I said, sign into your own tenant and explore the data that way. Some of the popular ones, getting my mail is a really popular one. A lot of people asking, how do I get my manager? And here you can see what the endpoint looks like. What is request header? you can consent on behalf of your organization if you have an admin account for all these permissions. And you can also open the access token and say, okay, here is the access token that I have that will be viewable after that you sign into the Graph Explorer. A couple things that might be interesting to you as well. If I go search, I wanted to see the people that I work with here /me/people, and I also very quickly wanted to add this into my application. Next, we're going to introduce you to the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. It's actually built into the Graph Explorer that you can see like how do I add a Graph Toolkit as part of it. So there you saw how we could use the Graph Explorer to explore different APIs that belong to the Microsoft Graph. And next, I'm going to talk about another tool that's kind of one layer deeper than the SDKs, which is called the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. It is a library of reusable web components automatically bound to M365 data via Microsoft Graph. It works great in development of web apps, PWAs, SharePoint web parts, or Microsoft Team tabs. And because it is based on web standards, you can use it with all kinds of web frameworks, and it works in modern web browsers. So the reason to use it is it's fully functional, so it cuts your development time a lot. So you build your applications and have your functionalities out faster. The second thing is you get a out-of-the-box M365 experience, but it's fully customizable and very flexible. And the last thing is what I said is based on web standards, so you can use it for with any web framework and in a lot of different browsers. And here are some of the ready-to-explore Microsoft Graph Toolkit components. You can play around and explore these components at mgt.dev. And I will show you a quick demo on how to use the playground, followed by how to get started with Microsoft Graph Toolkit. So in this demo, we're going to show you what the playground for Microsoft Graph Toolkit look like. If you remember, we were just talking about, what is the Graph Toolkit built for, and who is it for, and some of the cool components that we were just mentioning. And a good place to explore all these components is called mgt.dev. This is the playground that we built for developers to explore all the components existing in the toolkit. Let me make the screen a little bit bigger. On the left side is a list of components available to you. And you can see we've kind of built a couple samples into each component to help you learn, what are the options that you can use to add HTML attributes or JS properties in order to utilize these components. And on the right side in Canvas, above is what the components look like. If the screen was bigger, this would be like a left or right type of layout. And then you have a code editor right here, right next to the inside of the Canvas section that you can add or remove any properties or JavaScript in order to show live the changes in the Canvas. And if you're curious, what are the available attributes or properties, you can go to the Docs tab, scroll down. Here's a list of HTML attributes. Maybe I can say I want to show presence for all the people that's listed right here. So I'm just going to add show presence right here. Now you can see there's a little bubble showing presence unknown because I didn't really sign into any of these users, but you get the gist. I will give you another example is in the on the left side, outside of the component section, we also have a section for samples that might be useful to you. For example, by simply adding two tags, which is MGT login and MGT agenda, you can quickly see the sign-in users' mails. And you can also utilize the templating that we have in order to see people's group messages or team messages that way. Okay, that's the end of the third demo. The fourth one is how to get started with MGT. 1 second, I'll just get ready and then we can get started. Okay, this is the beginning of demo number 4. I've just showed you, how to where to find all the components for for the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, and some of the basic knowledge that you needed to know in order to incorporate it into your application. So what if you're new in order to use the Microsoft Graph Toolkit? Here is how easy it is to add it to your application in about 3 minutes. So let's look at how you would import it and add a component super fast. So I'm here in my development folder, and I'm just gonna make a directory, call it mgt simple, and immediately cd into it. And in this, I'm just gonna open up VS Code in this folder. And there was nothing in this for now. So I'm gonna right click, create a new file, create index.html. Let me enlarge the screen. Maybe this is a good size. Okay. And I'm gonna use the default HTML template in here, where you can see there's nothing really, just a HTML tag, a section of head, a section of body. So changing this to demo so that it shows the right title. And the first thing I wanted to do is import the script tag from MGT in order to use it. So where to find everything or anything that you needed to know about MGT is if I go to aka.ms/mgt-docs. This is our official developer docs released to the Graph Toolkit. And on the left side, here's getting started link. In the overview section, here's how to easily get started with the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. And you can also see there are a couple other samples that are very popular. For example, building SharePoint web part, building Teams tab, or using it with React or with Angular. Or we have, getting started guide that was just revamped this month as well. So scrolling down, like I said, we just wanted to import MGT using a script tag. So right here, I'm going to copy the script tag and paste it here, save it. And then from here, what you need to do is add a Nsl Provider. In the Nsl Provider, what I need is supplied a client ID. And this is what you would need to register your application with Azure Active Directory, where you will get a client ID from there. If you don't know how to do that, please follow up or ask a question later, and then we'll show you the documentation of how to do this. So I'm gonna grab the client ID real quick from right here. This is what I earlier already gotten from registering my application in AAD. And the other thing that I wanted to add here outside of using the Nsl authentication provider is quickly add a logging component. So saving it. From here, all I needed to do is I'm going to do a live server, which seems like I don't have it installed on here yet. So let me do live server. This is a super useful tool that you can use to quickly host your local web pages. So what I'm gonna do is, so now that that is installed, I'm gonna go back to my index.html and click right here on the bottom right, go live. So allow access. Ta-da, here's the sign in button. And if I click sign in, it's gonna recognize my browser's profile right here. So I'm just gonna sign in with Megan. Weird. Oh, okay, I know why. Because it automatically directed me to 1.127.001. So I'm gonna do localhost 5500, which is right here, the port number. That's actually different from before if you were paying attention. So let's see if this time it's gonna give me the right one. Yay. This is because when I was registering my application, I actually added localhost 5500 as part of the redirect URI versus the 1.71, but that's another trick. If you have questions around that, let us know. We'll show you about that later. So here now you can see Megan is signed in, and very quickly all we did was importing MGT as a script tag, and then added two very simple things. One is the authentication provider, the other one is our login component. So there you have it, how to get started with Microsoft Graph Toolkit in very short amount of time. The last demo I want to show is how do we put everything together in order to enable you to have this connected experience with Microsoft Graph. So the demo is called a meeting capture. I'm just going to play this real quick. So in this demo, we're going to show you how to create a meeting right where you are without changing context. And this is what's keeping us most productive every day, is no context switching. I'm just going to complete my task where I am, whether it's Teams, Outlook, or to-dos. And here you can see in my Teams environment, as part of the team, I have a Teams tab enabled that's having a application installed. And we're using all sorts of Microsoft Graph APIs to create a meeting, search for people that I wanted to add to this meeting, find available meeting times, creating meeting agenda, and finally attach files using the add attachment endpoints. So this page alone, even though it looks very simple and clean, there are endpoints working together, graph endpoints working together to enable this experience to be complete. So now that I've added all the details for the meeting that I wanted to create, when I save it, it's going to call the Microsoft Graph to create this meeting for me right here in my Teams environment. And then in the next view, you can see this is a kind of an MGT agenda view that connects to your calendar. And you can see on the left, that's MGT person. And we're showing, the key information for this meeting. And you don't have to switch again to go make a note or save it somewhere else in notes or open up your to-do. And right here, we're using MGT tasks. In the V2 version of MGT, we're also going to have a MGT to-do components, which a lot of you has been asking for. And here it is, creating all these productivity information that I wanted to do within a Teams tab. And I think we're done. And then, like I promised, the last part of the presentation is all about discovering Microsoft Graph powered apps. So you could go to graph.microsoft.com, scroll down at the bottom of the page, there's a section for customer solutions to explore, what other people or companies have used the Microsoft Graph to do, to give you some inspiration. And if you want to look a little further, for ideas, you can also go to App Source and look at the Office 365 productivity and the collaboration apps, where you find thousands of apps where they are frequently connected to the graph and showcase a wide variety of ways to integrate with M365 platform. Last but not least, here are a list of resources that I kind of mentioned before. Getting started with the graph, using the Graph Explorer, our developer docs, where to find the toolkit, where to find all the ready to explore apps in the last part, and then some of the partner examples. I'm going to switch gear. That is everything I wanted to talk about for Microsoft Graph. And I know Sam's got some really exciting things to share with you on Fluid Framework.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Beth. I am so excited to talk to you all today. Today we're going to talk about the Fluid Framework. And if you haven't heard of us yet, that totally makes sense. We just open sourced our project in September of 2020. So today, we're going to give an intro to it. We're going to talk about the basics and the value of the Fluid Framework and why you might use it. I am Sam Broner. I'm a senior engineer on the team. I've been with the team for about 3 years, basically since the inception. Well, I'm just excited to share with you all. So I just introduced myself. We're going to talk about what, how, and why Fluid. Why would you use Fluid? We'll go over the big picture. How's this whole thing work? And we'll end with a demo and we'll talk about how the code works, and we'll do a little walkthrough there. So what, how, why Fluid? The basic framing of this is that we have two key value propositions. Fluid makes collaborative applications much easier to build, and we make sure that applications with users that are all working on the same data. We just make that process much simpler for developers. And the second thing we do is we make applications that are portable. We make sure that your application can live in multiple hosts very easily. Let's talk about how we did that and why we did that. So this is a common scenario for us. We've got Kevin and we've got Anna, and they're collaborating on this silly to-do list application, like adding to-do list items, reordering this to-do list. Even in this simple scenario, we've got some immediate questions as a developer. I'm a developer. If I were to build this, I'd be wondering, how do I make this collaborative experience? How do I make sure Kevin's changes and Anna's changes both end up in this application here? And then I'd ask, once I made this little widget, this to-do list app, where do I put it so that I can make it as useful as possible for our customers? How do I make sure that Kevin and Anna get to use the to-do list app exactly where they want to and can access it easily? So we realized that this question was coming up over and over again for all sorts of collaborative applications. How do we handle multiple users, and where are we hosting this application? It was, to say it a little differently, we were realizing that we were almost going to build another service to handle collaboration for each new use case. If I build a to-do list app, I might have to build a standalone collaborative service, and that just doesn't really make sense. I should have one tool that handles that for a bunch of scenarios. And at the same time, I might be asking, am I gonna have to reintroduce this to-do list app into an existing user experience? Like, am I gonna have to host a new website for each to-do list app like thing I'm making? These don't seem like perfect answers to me as a developer. So the same question comes up for all sorts of scenarios: rich text editing, inking, user presence, gaming, whatever you're working on. We're trying to figure out how do we simplify the collaborative story and the portability story. So as we started exploring this problem space, the first realization is that collaboration is surprisingly hard. It seems like it's going to be just as easy as taking my changes and Beth's changes, or Anna's changes and Kevin's changes, and sort of merging them into some data structure, and we'd be off to the races. But that's actually my office on the screen there. That's the Fluid Teams library that was sort of right over my shoulder. And that's a bunch of papers on how collaboration is done right now. There's a whole lot of academic research being done on it. And what we realized is algorithms like optimistic concurrency, that's sort of a relatively simple algorithm. It has limited use case for a lot of end user scenarios. And we also realized that OT, that's operational transformations, and CRDTs, conflict-free replicated data types, they're pretty generally applicable, but they're difficult to implement, and they might require special case implementations for each use case. So if I did a to-do list app, I might have to rework my OT model or my CRDT model specifically for that use case. And then as we began to address the portability question, the experience sort of speaks for itself. I built this to-do list app. As you can see, this middle thing is a website with a to-do list application on it. I want to be able to have that same experience with all the same data show up across different endpoints. So I'm showing this in some M365 properties. This is Teams on the left and Outlook Web on the right. I'm just using them as an example. This isn't built into our open source library, but it's the kind of thing that you could imagine doing with the open source library. To do this today, you would need to use something like iframes. You might have some sort of, you might have a package that's sort of like a to-do list package, but there just isn't a great way to write a fully portable experience that's super collaborative and has a lot of state. As a developer, this model is a huge relief. I can write something once, I can deploy it to a bunch of different endpoints, and the user session, all this user data actually lives in this to-do list application. So a really powerful model. Let's take a step back and just answer some of the high-level questions. So that's why and sort of a little bit of what we're building, but mostly the why. And let's talk about what is the Fluid Framework. The Fluid Framework is a collection of client libraries for building portable applications, so applications that can be hosted on multiple websites with distributed state. Distributed state is what allows you to do that low latency collaboration like you saw in the to-do list application. So that's what we provide in our open source project. You can find these packages on npm.js. This is available for use. This is what we're offering. We also have a reference service implementation, so you can deploy your own Fluid server, which is a pretty easy process, and we'll have more documentation on that in the future. You might also be asking yourself, when would I use the Fluid Framework? So anytime you need to sync data between clients, if I want to have something on my screen show up on Beth's screen, I might use the Fluid Framework. Real-time text editing is a great scenario. Presence, where is my mouse in this document, or where is it on the page? Real-time inking looks beautiful with Fluid because the latency is so low that it's you just get a much more fluid ink stroke. And then, of course, games. Replicating state from machine to machine is a classic scenario in multiplayer games. And then, when would I use Fluid Framework Part 2? You also might want to reuse one application, like the to-do list, across different websites. And so I just showed you the to-do list example, and I fleshed out a little bit, but there's a whole slew of examples of where that reuse gets really powerful, and we're excited to see what people build using this new tool. A comment pane maybe that spans across websites. There's a bunch of ideas, and I'm really excited to see what gets built and used across different line of business applications and maybe your businesses. And of course, games again, always fun to do reuse with games. So that brings us to, we know what the problem sort of looks like, and we sort of know what the Fluid Framework is offering, what kind of scenarios it might apply to, but why would I specifically use these libraries? And it's because building low latency collaborative experiences is hard, and writing an application once and deploying it anywhere just saves time, and it makes the user experience better. You get a much more consistent user experience. So this is what we're offering, and this is what we're talking about. This is what we're looking at. Now, let's look at Fluid in action, because this so far has just been sort of academic prose. Let's look at some of the things that we can build with the Fluid Framework. I kept this window open. I'm pointing to our documentation site here, fluidframework.com. As you can see, we've got a getting started guide here, some other features. Let's look at the docs though. On the documentation page, we've got some getting started guides. We do a little bit of an intro to advanced topics. As you can see, we've got why Fluid here. But this is, we're gonna have more to come here. This is our sort of first pass of the documentation. We can look at the API tab now. In the API tab, we have some of the function calls, how to use certain packages within the open source framework. And again, something we're still working on, but it's a good start. And you can see a to-do in there. It's a good start, and we're excited for you to check it out. All right, I already opened up a tab to the right that has the playground in it. This is something I'm really excited about. This is a place for you to check out Fluid Framework applications in action. So in front of you here is an example of a note-taking application that Dan Wallin and Nick Simons demoed just a few weeks ago. They did a great job, worth checking out their talk. But today we're going to talk about ProseMirror. So ProseMirror is a fantastic open source library text editor. And you can see if I type in one of these windows, it's collaborative by default. This is something that we enabled with the Fluid framework. And I just want to talk about it for a moment. We took about a day to implement this, and I'm very familiar with the Fluid framework model, and I'm relatively familiar with Prose Mirror, so it might have been a bit faster for me, but we're really excited about how easy it was to make a collaborative text editor. I hope you can trust me when I say this is the kind of thing that takes a really long time without the Fluid framework. If you go down to the page a little bit, you'll see I pulled out some code highlights. I'm just trying to show what are the key parts of the Fluid framework libraries that you're using when you use Prose Mirror. And so let's talk about it. We're going to jump back to the slide deck and we'll break down what's going on in this demo. This is a pretty live Prose Mirror scenario, and we're going to talk about it over the next few minutes. The Fluid framework application starts with the loader. The loader is the key thing that you're going to need to include on your website to host Fluid applications. The loader is what really makes it portable. Any Fluid container, any Fluid application can be loaded by the loader that we provide. The container, this is your application. We call it a container because it's sort of the outer boundary of your application, and it includes all of the necessary parts to make it run. It includes the app logic and it includes state. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. I like to think of this as sort of a shipping container. It's got all of your stuff in it. The next up would be data objects. So a data object is a way to organize your collaborative pieces of your application. This is a little breakdown of your app, kind of a part of your app, a way to organize it. You might think of it as a crate within your container that's holding all of your stuff. Finally, we have the DDSs, the distributed data structures. This is anything inside of your crates. This is actually where we're storing state. And when we talked earlier about all of those algorithms that you would use to move state from my machine to Beth's machine that we were looking at, this is part of our fundamental research. This is what allows us to move state efficiently from my computer to yours. It's because the DDSs, the distributed data structures, are moving that data from place to place. So we're looking back at the Prose Mirror text editor here, and I want to talk about how these parts line up to the actual experience we're seeing. Your web page just needs to include the loader. That's the requirement here, is that you include the loader and it's going to allow you to load the container. Next up, we've got the container. This whole experience is the container. This is sort of the application. It's a text editor. We also have these data objects. We've got two of them on the screen, or we could have two of them on the screen. There's one that's for the settings or sort of the preferences, you know, how the formatting is going to work. And there's another that's the actual text editing area. It controls the app logic of like, how does the button click work if you hit the bold button, or what happens on a keystroke. And then ultimately we use the distributed data structures to actually move the state from one machine to the other. This is, you know, again, where that state transfer is happening. And for the preferences up here, the formatting, we're using a shared map. That's one of our distributed data structures. It works a lot like a JavaScript map that you're familiar with. And for the text editing portion, we're using a shared string, which is powered by our merge tree algorithm. And this operates relatively similarly to a string. It's a little bit more complex because the topic's more complex. This is, you know, collaborative algorithms have a lot of complexity to them. Building a collaborative text editor from the ground up is actually a really tricky proposition. It took the Microsoft Word team some time. It takes people a lot of time to build great collaborative text editors. This took us about a day. Now we're fairly familiar with the Prose Mirror model, and we're fairly familiar, you know, I would say very familiar with the Fluid framework, but it still took us about a day. That's actually quite fast. And one of the great things is you could actually take our work and just sort of directly bring it into your own application if you'd like to. So these things are composable in that way. You could take our work and build on top of it. But we think it really simplified building a collaborative text editor. And a collaborative text editor is one of the most complicated collaborative scenarios you might want to build to. So now we've talked about what that prose mirror is like. Let's talk about what you would have to build, what you'd have to actually touch as you build an application with the Fluid framework. You would have to build data objects and their views. So data objects with the DDSs is sort of your data model, and then the views can be created with any web technology and can either be included in your Fluid container or not. But this is what you're gonna have to build. The data object and DDSs, they get wrapped in your container, and it doesn't require very much work. Most of your time is gonna be spent working with the DDSs and the data objects. So let's take another second to look at those two key parts of the Fluid ecosystem. You've got your distributed data structures. These are the primitive data types that the Fluid framework uses to synchronize state across clients. You'll often hear about ops, operations. These are sort of changes to your DDSs. And ops, we're going to get back to, it's key to how we make sure that Fluid framework scales. But the key point is DDSs, synchronized state. This is where you're going to put your data when you make a Fluid application. Next up, data objects. This is code that encapsulates one or more of the DDSs, and it's going to define the rules for handling changes to DDSs. Our DDSs raise events, regular JavaScript events, that you'll listen to, and you'll modify the UI based on some change in state. And this developer model is what we use to build the prose mirror example that you just looked at. So some more common questions that we get. Does it scale? I am very excited to say yes, it does scale. And it scales really significantly for some really clear design decisions, because of some clear design decisions. Fluid is rate limited really only by Apache Kafka. And if you've read about Apache Kafka, you'll know that people use it for enormous workflows, well beyond what a document, one document with user-created changes would have. Our algorithm is mostly moving processing to the client, and so there's no service that would be the bottleneck for your collaborative experience. This really reduces latency and massively increases our ability to scale. I'm going to show you some photos of a little bit of why that works so well for us. So what we've got on the page right now is a Fluid application. This is a container. It's got a view, a data object, and some DDSs in it, and it's hosted on contoso.com at a certain ID. That Fluid application is communicating with the Fluid service only by sending the changes to the DDSs. So all it's sending is little updates about the Fluid service, and then the Fluid application is receiving those ops back. What we can do is we can add 1, 2, 10, 100. We've done some demos with 1,000 users. Where all we're doing is we're taking operations in, we're ordering them, and you can learn more about that at the fluidframework.com site, and we're sending them back to the applications. And then on your client machine, you're reconstructing the state out of those ops. So ops are kind of a key concept for us. You won't have to work too closely with them, but it's core to how we enable this low latency code. Do I have to use Fluid Framework with React or Angular, Vue, or any of these Vue frameworks? Nope, definitely not. Fluid is entirely Vue agnostic. Bring whatever library you love. We've used React in some of our demos because some of the team had prior experience. You might find more examples of that, but we're really looking for more examples using all of the Vue libraries. And this is a classic question. This is a really interesting comment. Is the Fluid framework different from WebSockets? Maybe SignalR, Socket.io, etc. It is different, and it's a pretty critical difference. SignalR is about moving data in real time between clients, while Fluid is a more abstract way to keep your data structures in sync. So we actually can use SignalR or Socket.io, WebSockets in general, to transfer those ops that we showed earlier on in the presentation, but Fluid is going to be doing the work of keeping your data structures in sync, and that's work that you don't have to do as a developer. So that's mostly it for us today. We open sourced in early September, as I mentioned. We are really eager to get your questions. I'm eager to get your questions. We're very interested in your feedback, and we super want you to build stuff. A hosted Fluid service is in the works. It's not been released yet, but just know that's sort of coming. And then I wanted to leave these on the page for you all. We have 3 repositories on the left: GitHub, Microsoft Fluid Framework. That's sort of our main repository. We've got a group of examples at Microsoft/Fluid Examples, and we've got a Hello World at Microsoft Fluid Hello World. You can reach me at Twitter or on GitHub with my username @SamBroner, or the Fluid team with @Fluid Framework. And of course, check out our documentation on the fluidframework.com website. Really looking forward to hearing from you. Very excited to take your questions. We in this live, so put them in the chat. Beth and I are there, ready. Beth, you ready for the questions?
Yes, of course. Born ready.
Awesome. All right, we're looking forward to it. We'll talk to you there.